history's great scorers. And Curry authored the greatest scoring regular season ever, becoming the only player in the three.
That's crazy getting on with us, man.
Had an enormous effect as well, because Steph required unique defensive attention. When Curry had the ball, they jumped his screens hard or simply passed it so he was forced to give it up. And this led to wide
Ain't
open
nobody come here to
shots.
see you
But
loaded.
Steph's teammates shot a chilly 28% from downtown with him on the court in the finals. By the way, other teams mimicked these tactics in the ensuing years, and Curry responded by gaining some muscle to help absorb this kind of physical load. So that Cleveland defense had an effect, but Steph also lost some of his rhythm and lateral quickness by playing through pain and some stiffness after that injury, and his normal ability to punish big men on some of these switches was noticeably absent at times in that series. He wasn't sharp handling some of those Cavalier traps, throwing a few lazy passes, and turnovers were a problem for him in general. Even with fantastic ball handling, he could be a bit sloppy at times, and his dribbling aggression came with some risks. Whether this was more rust or game planning, Curry's playoff scoring wasn't quite as otherworldly as his regular season stampedes, which still made him an all-time level scorer, just not an outlier. So much of defending Curry is about what's happening away from the action, and that kind of defensive attention leads to open shots for the Warriors. This is Curry's legendary gravity, pulling extra defenders into his orbit even when he didn't have the ball. And this is a sizable part of his offensive impact, drawing the defense away from his teammates as they freak out about his shooting. The price to pay for devoting so many resources to stopping Steph's scoring was wide open layups at the hoop while defenses fixated on Curry. And people often point out that these defenders are merely confused, which is true because guarding Curry creates confusion. The margin for error is minuscule. Sometimes it's not even confusion. The Jazz devote the entire weak side to keeping an eye on Curry, and even with 3 defenders, they will concede a Draymond Green triple before losing Steph. Some gravity is more subtle. LeBron would normally be closer to the block on the weak side, but he's whispering sweet somethings in Steph's ear in the corner. Here's some relocation gravity, where none of these defenders are even thinking about closing out to Klay Thompson, one of humanity's best shooters of the round ball. And sometimes defenders start anticipating what to do, and that leads to more layups. These kinds of plays are exactly how a so-called jump shooting team can lead the league in field goal percentage at the rim. We noted last episode how Curry made life easier for Durant, and nothing symbolizes this better than the second quarter of the 2017 finals, where Curry parted the seas for him not once, but twice in transition. Steph's shooting accuracy changed the rules on the fast break, where defenders prioritized him over guarding the ball at times. The traditional approach of sprinting back to the paint didn't work with him because they ended up leading to practice shots. Reggie Miller was the first player to regularly run to the three-point line in transition, but Curry couldn't be given any airspace from inside 30 feet, so he could find cracks to exploit when defenses weren't set. This should be a layup here because Durant prioritizes Curry, but he also loses contact with Steph, and so it's a super efficient open 3. This is exactly why you'll see defenders run to the line with Steph, leaving the paint wide open for a ball hit. You'll notice Klay has a gravitational pull on defenders too, and this made the two of them so difficult to guard as a tandem, and particularly in screening actions, where defenders are still accustomed to chasing Thompson around screens, and any brief lapse leaves one of the 2 best shooters ever uncovered.
Goddamn Wade.
Here, Curry turns this cut into a screen, his man keeps going to Clay, and the often stationary James Harden is left sealed off, and it's a layup. When defenses wisen up to his back picks like this, Curry can then fake these screens, slipping out to his personal ATM for some more cash. So then defenders remind themselves, always stay with Steph, always stay with Steph, and that glues defenders to him while his teammates practice more layups. He was also a nasty little screener because smaller guys tend to get away with additional contact and movement as part of their natural grappling away from the action. Oh, by the way, Curry could pass too. While his teammates were usually piling up assists from his off-ball movement, he could send it home himself for wide open layups, too wide open some might say. Steph's combination of movement and ball handling meant he could flow from a cut to a drive to a kickout to feed his teammates. And his release speed helped him turn an off-the-dribble threat into a quick delivery for two. All of his supergiant gravity in transition opened up passing lanes as well. And it was the same story setting up for a deep pull-up. 3 Jazz are pulled into his orbit, and it's high.
Yes, I know that ain't Brandon, but that's money, Mitch.
Curry had good vision in general. He's probing for a pull-up, but snaps off a live dribble pass instead, and he hit a bunch of these little creases to the floor in transition. Here's another quick trigger pass off the bounce. This time he whips it left-handed, although Clay wasn't really in the mood for a layup apparently, so it turns into a right-handed driving kick from Curry. Kickout passes were actually a bit of an adventure for him because of how small he was. He couldn't throw it over the top, so deflections were an issue. And when he probed deeper, size could swallow up his passing angles and clog his outlet.
Swallow up his passing angles.
Somebody was over here.
Dribble alive and had cleaner sight lines, these turned into open threes. But he could also dribble himself into a forest of trees where he couldn't really see the best pass. The top of the key is wide open here, and yet it's another deflection. He could get into the paint and find laydown passes when help came over, but accuracy could also be a problem on some of these deliveries. Some of Steph's passing at the rim was a bit wild like this. Note this was a no-look attempt, and Curry mixed in his fair share of lookaways to make up for that lack of passing height. It also helped that he varied his deliveries, mixing hook passes with bouncers and little two-handed drop-offs like this. Some of these were bold ideas. This is a Magic Johnson heater past J.R. Smith's ear, and this play shows reflexes and court awareness, spinning to find a teammate in tight quarters. However, some bold ideas bordered on reckless, throwing errant behind-the-back passes, or just wavering into sloppiness on basic deliveries, leading to more turnovers. Out of spread pick and roll, he could deliver most passes. This is a basic strong side help off the shooter a pass away, and here's a skip pass where the weak side defender slides over to help, and it's another Draymond 3. It was actually rare for Curry to get downhill with his classic 2-on-1, because he usually just took a 3 against coverages like this. He could certainly hit the opposite side shooter, but it was more common to see a second defender jump him while his teammates rolled to the basket. This is a bit late because it was tricky throwing these around bigger defenders. On this play, the big man gives him space, so it's a much easier completion before the paint help arrives. Compare that to this coverage, where 2 huge defenders are involved, one pressuring Curry on the ball, while Durant sits in front of the roller, and it's a different pass. Another thing that changes his pick and roll dynamic is where many of these screens are set. Curry's near the logo here, and so it takes longer to hit screeners who aren't shooting threats when they roll. This time it's staggered screens, and again, size makes it uncomfortable enough to bypass Durant for a short roll pass, but he uses the look away and throws it out of bounds. So Steph saw most
Somebody
valuable
right there.
passes on screen and rolls. It was often just a matter of finding a delivery angle so he could send it home. Again, this meant using those whip passes
Shooting
and
at a
hook
nigga
passes
too.
that he loved with both hands, and he sprinkled in more audacious lobs or soft deliveries as well. Many teams simply trapped the Curry pick and roll just to get the ball out of his hands, and that could stall the offensive touch. If Harden recovered on time here, this wouldn't be an open KD jumper, which is where Draymond's short roll passing became so critical, gashing teams in these 4-on-3s. Green's ball handling, high-end vision, and speed made him a phenomenal fit next to Curry, where he could pick apart defenses as a roll man when opposing teams tried to neuter Steph's three-point shooting. A great passing hub like Draymond is an ideal partner for off-ball workhorses like Curry. He can capitalize on Steph's gravity from the top, make extra passes after Curry is trapped, or collapse the defense with the ball himself, setting up arguably the greatest perimeter finisher ever. This helped those Warriors teams put together phenomenal regular season offenses, and while they were still great in the playoffs, they fell back a little, commensurate with Curry's drop in scoring we saw earlier. Keep in mind, though, teams sold out to take away his scoring, so that huge off-ball effect made him a playmaking machine. Estimates of his shot creation land in the top 15 of all time, and it's hard to say how well that even accounts for his unique ability to stretch defenses. So there are lingering Curry on the ball while Durant sits in front of the roller, spinning to find a teammate in tight quarters. However, some bold ideas bordered on reckless, throwing errant behind the back passes, or just wavering into sloppiness on basic deliveries, leading to more turnovers. Out of spread pick and roll, he could deliver most passes. This is a basic strong side help off the shooter to pass away. And here's a skip pass where the weak side defender slides over to help, and it's another Draymond 3. It was actually rare for Curry to get downhill with his classic 2-on-1, because he usually just took a 3 against coverages like this. He could certainly hit the opposite side shooter, but it was more common to see a second defender jump him while his teammates rolled to the basket. This is a bit late because it was tricky throwing these around bigger defenders. On this play, the big man gives him space, so it's a much easier completion before the paint help arrives. Compare that to this coverage, where two huge defenders are involved, one pressuring Curry on the ball, while Durant sits in front of the roller, and it's a different pass. Another thing that changes his pick and roll dynamic is where many of these screens are set. Curry's near the logo here, and so it takes longer to hit screeners who aren't shooting threats when they roll.
Who's shooting at me?
This time it's staggered screens, and again, size makes it uncomfortable enough to bypass Durant for a short roll pass, but he uses the look away and throws it out of bounds. So Steph saw most valuable passes on screen and roll.
Man, that video, y'all put in there with Surge.
Angle so he could send it home.
But T put in there with Surge.
Again, this meant using those whip passes and hook passes that he loved with both hands, and he sprinkled in more audacious lobs or soft deliveries as well. Many teams simply trapped the Curry pick and roll just to get the ball out of his hands, and that could stall the offensive touch. If Harden recovered on time here, this wouldn't be an open KD jumper, which is where Draymond's short roll passing became so critical, gashing teams in these 4-on-3s. Green's ball handling, high-end vision, and speed made him a phenomenal fit next to Curry, where he could pick apart defenses as a roll man when opposing teams tried to neuter Steph's three-point shooting. A great passing hub like Draymond is an ideal partner for off-ball workhorses like Curry. He can capitalize on Steph's gravity from the top, make extra passes after Curry is trapped, or collapse the defense with the ball himself, setting up arguably the greatest perimeter finisher ever. This helped those Warriors teams put together phenomenal regular season offenses, And while they were still great in the playoffs, they fell back a little, commensurate with Curry's drop in scoring we saw earlier. Keep in mind, though, teams sold out to take away his scoring, so that huge off-ball effect made him a playmaking machine. Estimates of his shot creation land in the top 15 of all time, and it's hard to say how well that even accounts for his unique ability to stretch defenses. So there are lingering questions about his offensive impact in the playoffs, but before we get to those, we need to look at just how effective he was on the defensive end.
Mike.
Oh, this is
Yeah, it's bigger to the mic.
I thought you were doing the Ricky Bobby thing like that.
No, this is my mic.
I got you. I'm feeling great, but I'm excited about the final. We got 4 wins to go, so hopefully we get it done.
While the Warriors dynasty set a new standard for offensive excellence, they were also a high-end defensive team. As one of the best defenders of the 21st century, Draymond Green led Golden State's switchable, intelligent scheme on that end. And because the Warriors surrounded Curry with 4 players who were 6'6" or taller most of the time, it was common practice for teams to target Steph in the playoffs. The Cavs did this in bursts during all of their final matchups, looking for a switch onto the dangerous Kyrie Irving or the much larger LeBron James, who could use his size to back Curry down into the post and force help or score himself. In the 2018 Western Finals, Houston hunted Curry even more since attacking weak spots with James Harden or Chris Paul was a core part of their offense. This strategy adds to the wear and tear, potentially slowing down his attack and getting him into foul trouble. But otherwise, it wasn't even enormously effective because Curry held up pretty well against even the game's best position scorer. This one with 3 finally taken over, and against Harden there were strong moments. He drove, did a drive on me, then crowds him and takes one in the ear for an offensive foul. Steph was pesky on the ball like this. They're from down the storm aiming at us. The left hand slows down the driver, the right hand then controls him a little, and he was small enough to get away with this contact. And they don't went to that water. I know it's physical in general on defense, actively pawing at the ball and bodying up ball handlers with his hands high when they drove like this. He didn't have incredible lateral quickness. He goes to put some weight into Irving here and turns into a matador trying to recover. But he wasn't smoked off the dribble too frequently because of how active he was on the balls of his feet, his willingness to get physical, and his reaction time. Notice the really short steps, which helps him stay balanced so he can quickly change directions with the ball handle. You can see how sharp his reflexes are here, sliding with Harden's crossover immediately, bodying him hard, and then he smothers a shot at the end. Curry loves attacking the ball at the end of a move like this. He's a bit behind on this one, but ends up with a late strip. And his hands were active on the outside as well, preventing a step-back attempt on this play. Steph was often trying to overcome a size disadvantage. Not really. He wasn't going to throw off many shots vertically. Just looking at what's going to happen that game. Like this gave him a chance, even if it led to some fouls in the process. That hand-eye coordination helped him connect on plenty of these when he was balanced and had a clear look at the ball, catching leather not once but twice in this sequence. He's completely beaten here. Again, grabs an arm to slow down the dribbler, and the hands play from behind. Curry was a mismatch for bigger players on the block. On this one, he tries to hold off LeBron, but James is too powerful, and so it's a foul. His countermeasure for this was to front the post hard and deny an entry pass in the first place, and because he had a high-revving motor, he was pretty successful with this technique. Here he sits down to take away the entry, then works hard to trap the ball at a different angle, and comes up with a steal. The Warriors had other techniques to protect him, pre-switching Curry here so he wouldn't be involved in the pick and roll, and then Draymond sees a potential mismatch and breaks up the post pass beautifully. Steph could also get really physical with screeners, which helped avoid a switch, and kept everyone on their original assignment. Although crowding potential screeners and getting handsy with them opened up a few backdoor cuts, and when Steph overplayed off-ball shooters like this, he occasionally received a taste of his own medicine. Unsurprisingly, he was also physical, chasing players off the ball. He could lean over his toes and get off balance like that. And again, here's some hand fighting and subtle holding to stay connected, and then on the ball more the usual jabbing at the rock and sliding to stay in front of the dribble. When guarding the ball handler, he could power through some of these screens sometimes to stay with his man. And even if that didn't work, he was quite good about staying connected to the screener on a switch using his bag of tricks. I'd say he was generally good navigating ball screens, here steering the dribbler away from the screen by design, then activating those hands on the roll pass for another steal. On this one, he steps up in front of the screen nicely to avoid it, and that contains everything well, although Curry gambles for a steal, and that exposes the Warriors in the paint. He actually rarely took overt gambles like that. He was selective about selling out for these sneak attacks, and his ability to play passing lanes was based more on anticipation and reflexes than on risk-taking. This, again, made him similar to Bird. Their best defensive strength was reading these kinds of passes and timing up interceptions without taking needless chances. This is a 3-on-1, and he spots the passer's eyes to make an incredible save off the lob, and then going the other way, turns it into 2 points himself. Steph was also dangerous, sneaking around outlet passes like this, and yeah, that's probably going in, and it is time to dance on the floor. Here's one off the inbounds, and this time Curry wants to bring Clay into the party, and that team was just unfair. Between his active hands and his ability to jump passes like this, Curry landed in the 93rd percentile historically in steals during these years. He was also smart about timing out his double teams, and what's key here is that he keeps going after the first effort, saving a layup with the extra help. And he rarely missed these second and third efforts on a defensive sequence, flowing from one responsibility to the next. That's a decent closeout to end the possession, although I wouldn't say he was that effective closing out because his size made jumpers easier for shooters. His small stature was a limiting factor on paint rotations too, where he could slide into position but couldn't offer much resistance at the rim. Steph was generally on point when he needed to rotate into the lane like this, and that's far better than being bigger but late to arrive or blowing the assignment. Here's a nice example where he's early to help on the pick and roll, then gives extra effort to tag a cutter when the ball switches to the other side of the court. But still, he added basically zero rim protection on high leverage plays where he needed to plug up the back line. And despite his consistent effort, he had an occasional attentional lapse, focusing in on the ball too much and falling a few steps out of position. Impact metrics actually view him as a solid positive defender, although his overall playoff numbers are far more pedestrian than his incredible regular season stats. But even if injuries weren't the reason why, his missed time still skewed these impact numbers. His teammates were able to inflate their plus-minus by playing weaker teams in early rounds. But Steph's plus-minus was accrued against championship-level opponents in the later rounds. If we calculated the numbers after Curry returned from his injuries, giving his teammates the same opponents as him, suddenly Steph looks like one of the most impactful playoff performers on record, even with a clear drop in 2016 compared to his surrounding seasons. And at least to me, that's a compelling signal that the extra defensive attention he received still shredded defenses, even if his scoring dipped as a result. Furthermore, in larger regular season samples, his numbers were still incredibly impressive against strong defenses when compared to weak ones, maintaining most of his volume and efficiency relative to other great players. There's also some evidence that he'll ramp up his scoring more when he shares the floor with weaker finishers. His volume of Durant and Thompson on the bench resembles video game levels, and these numbers are similar in a much larger regular season sample. Throughout all of these presentations, Golden State's efficiency was Curry on the court, made the lead. Well, they crushed their opponents. I do still have some concerns about his durability. Attacking him on defense and wearing down his legs seemed to have some effect.
He got killed.
But Curry's gravity is a constant
running away at the storm. Niggas did a drive-by on the
scalable offensive weapon.
Well, they got it with a car and did a drive-by on me.
Basically any other offensive star. He doesn't have the typical signs of an impact.
He telling me to stay out the road.
He doesn't look like a negative impact.
I went in the road, but I got hit though.
I know you can get hit anywhere. That's my point.
Shooting, off-ball impact, and that on-ball playmaking.
Oh,
Which is a
Trey,
one-of-a-kind package that combined to make Steph Curry perhaps the best offensive player.
They got the jump in the knee. I was with this behind y'all. I couldn't see who he was running off.
Check out Thinking Basketball on Amazon. That goes deeper on a number of ideas explored in this series. There are also longer discussions on many of these players on the Thinking Basketball podcast. And if you're curious about stats from this video, there's an entire stats series on this channel.
Nah, you asked with that Trey layout.
Enjoyed this one. And
I guess that be on the video.
A great day.
That was you laughing in that video. Buffalo at. We weren't even talking about that on.
What video?
Buffalo said who that is laughing. When we were talking about him and T, he thought, I guess he think we were laughing at the video because he got, I think he missed a wide open 3 on this video.
Is somebody on that boat? No, it ain't.
I don't even think he was watching it on. Nah,
Kill him.
You weren't watching those screens, and that's so I ain't like you could throw what going on.
My goodness, what is the other nigga doing? He just in here collecting guns. Our partner trying to kill folks.
Our partner really John Wick.
Put Money Mitch.
Yeah.
He been knocking folks down. I don't know what the other nigga doing.
Today,
You better do butt in.
Fucked up.
No, he ain't. No, he ain't. What is this other nigga doing, man?
Follow him up, Wick.
That nigga knocking folks down. I wonder how many kills he gonna have for 2-on-1. We finna win.
let's do y'all teammate. Let's do y'all teammate.
We got 2 and they got 1. What other nigga at then? Better run around this shotgun. He better get the final kill. I know if they get caught in that storm, they both gonna be out of there.
That's a terrible way to die. That's a terrible way to die.
That nigga T said don't play the storm. It died so fast. So now play the storm by the time he finished that sentence.
I'm like, T, get it on. You better get it on. You on that now. Play the storm. Yeah, that nigga did.
Just like, what? Oh, and I didn't know they took you down this fast. Dang, what the final dude that he must be somewhere laying down trying to play the storm.
Listen to Bobo. Dead.
You see him?
I hear him shoot. Yeah.
about to be. Who threw a
Yeah, he
smoke
about to
bomb?
hit me chicken
NY.
dinner.
Somebody finna die and gonna be our partner. Oh, there he go. Oh, he didn't hit one of them boxes. No, he got a gun, lay somebody down in a couple shots.
Big bro.
Ah, what this nigga doing? Good shot. Think he gonna get the leg kill, man. That shotgun gonna hit somebody down.
Tell him thank you.
Nah, they did
Right
good
away,
though.
hell, I ain't get no kill.
Come on, tell them.
Hmm?
Tell them.